Dr. Jim Wetherbee passed away earlier this week. Longtime Idaho Reports viewers will know that Dr. Wetherbee was a regular guest on the show, with near weekly appearances on our pundits panel for decades. Wetherbee was the former executive director of the Association of Idaho Cities and a professor emeritus at Boise State University's School of Public Service. He was among the most astute observers of Idaho politics in the state's history, and he was always generous with his time with people who were willing to listen and learn. He loved his wife Dana and their children and grandchildren, and he spoke of them frequently. He also had a wicked sense of humor.
I think the kindness business has been overdone. As you know, or some of you know, I was a lobbyist for 15 years. And to be praised as being so kind, or I was told at more than one occasion that I was too nice a guy to be a lobbyist, and I took great offense at that.
And joining us today to remember Dr. Wetherbee is Kevin Richard of Idaho Education News, Dr. Stephanie Witt of Boise State University School of Public Service, and Jim Jones, former Attorney General and Supreme Court Justice. He joked. Jim Wetherbee joked that kindness was an insult to him, but he really was an incredibly kind and generous person when it came to his time and explaining what he knew to people like me who had so much to learn.
Yeah. Oh, he was a tremendously generous guy with me, with his time, with sharing information. I try to joke that the parts about Idaho I get right, I learned from Jim. You know, he was so patient with me when I first came to the state and first learning kind of how things work on the ground with Idaho's state and local governments, and he was so generous with me and with all our students. And he was a very dedicated teacher, and he put so much time in preparation, whether it was to return a call to someone on the media or to come into class or to do this show. I remember he had this big, thick binder that he would drag all over campus, even after he retired, doing background on whatever we were going to talk about that week on Idaho Reports.
Yeah, for years, we met with him twice a week for coffee in preparation for the show, and he would have that binder with him, and he would outline what he had his eye on and be able to give us some historical context, and just in the middle of this coffee shop. And I never wanted to take that for granted, because I learned so much from those coffee meetings.
I don't like the word mentor, because I think we've cheapened it as a society. We overuse it. Jim was a mentor to me and to so many of us who have tried to write about Idaho politics or study Idaho politics or just try to make sense of Idaho politics. He always had time for that, and he was so good. I mean, there was a time when I was at the Statesman that Bill Manny was an editor there, and he instituted a Wetherbee moratorium. He wanted reporters to have to go to somebody else to get context and insight and wisdom about Idaho politics, which says something. I mean, he was so good at it that he became, there was too much of a good thing. And it also really speaks to his generosity. He had time for the dumbest questions from reporters, and I know I exercised that a lot. He was just a true teacher, I had a chance a few years ago to go back to school and to get my master's in public administration at Boise State. I took 3 classes from Stephanie Witt, and I don't think I get that chance, because I don't think that program exists in Boise without Jim's vision for it, to have this thriving MPA program in the state's capital. And that's not just about me. I mean, you know it. I mean, there were so many smart and passionate people going through that program, and they got their chance to learn and to advance their careers in a program that has Jim's fingerprints all over it. I mean, that's a huge part of his legacy. Well, we just owe him so much. I know I owe him so much.
It's hard to find a governmental agency or elected body or nonprofit in the Treasure Valley that does not have a student who came from Wetherbee, right?
Yeah.
His students are running all of those kinds of organizations, and to me that's one of the best senses of his footprint on his legacy in the area, is the number of people from all political stripes that were former students of his.
Justice Jones, you knew him when you were Attorney General starting in 1983. He was with the Association of Idaho Cities at the time.
Yes. You know, I think I learned a lot from Jim too, because, you know, I'd run for Congress a couple of times unsuccessfully, and then I got the AG's job, but I really hadn't dealt with the legislature, didn't know a whole lot about how you'd approach that, you know. And just watching him, you know, he would come in and he would be honest and straightforward and humble and helpful. If there was something that was a little bit awry with the city's position, he would tell you. I mean, he would not hold back. And we worked with him very closely on issues related to city government, because Dan Chadwick in my office worked with the cities and helped them out on legal issues and so on.
And Chadwick was with the counties at the time.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, at that time he handled
that's right.
all local
Yes.
government.
Of course,
cities
of
and
course.
counties, irrigation districts. But, you know, it was just so helpful, and we always got along with him so good. And when he said something, you know you could count on it.
Yeah, it's a valuable trait to be sure. Well, and I think one of the best ways we could honor Jim's memory is to have a good, solid pundit panel right now, looking at some of the news of the week, because it was absolutely a busy week. I will say, if there is a public memorial service, that we will post that information on the Idaho Reports page if anyone is interested. A lot did happen this week in the legislature, and a lot, as always, happened in the education arena. Launch got its day in front of the Joint Budget Committee.
The first step happened on Friday. The Joint Finance Appropriations Committee funded Launch. They gave Governor Little his funding request. That was the easy step. I mean, that's a pretty solid committee in terms of support for Launch. What happens now, and we've talked so much this session about this whole budget process, this whole budgeting process, and how different it is. What happens to a Launch budget bill in the House and the Senate? Well, now we go into this uncharted territory, and you know, a lot of it, you know, points right towards Mike Moyle, the Speaker of the House, who is no fan of Launch and has made no bones about that. I spoke to him on Thursday and said, "Is a Launch bill going to make it onto the floor?" And he said, you know, he did not make that assurance. He said, you know, I could put it in the House Ways and Means Committee and bury it, and don't think I won't. It depends on what the bill looks like. So we'll see. You know, this is a very unusual, you know, unprecedented process for budgeting. So, you know, we'll see where it goes from here.
Well, and we heard from Governor Little last week that he did not have an assurance from the House Speaker that Launch, which is, you know, his big program for his second term, that Launch would get a vote on the House floor at all.
No, and there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. I mean, I think the point that he's trying to make, and we've heard other people make it, is that there's a lot of support in the communities for this, that there are a lot of high school seniors who've applied. There are a lot of employers who are looking for help finding employees. I know the governor is kind of hoping that kind of critical mass brings pressure to bear on lawmakers who may be on the fence about this. We'll see.
On Friday, the House passed the school facilities bill with only 6 no votes. There was a lot of debate, and a lot of people brought up concerns about the bill and different provisions in the 30 pages of the legislation. But ultimately, it passed pretty easily. Kevin, did you have a chance to watch that debate?
I did not, but I'm not terribly surprised by the results. I think the House vote was pretty anticlimactic when you see what was happening in the committee earlier this week. You've got the governor behind this, you've got legislative leadership behind it, you've got education groups behind it. I mean, who's going to stand in the path of it at this point? And I can't imagine it's going to hit much resistance in the Senate unless something really unusual surfaces in the days to come.
It seems, Dr. Witt, like most people agree that something needs to be done about school facilities. You know, we've been talking about this. This is not a new issue at all. This has been going on for decades, that there is uneven funding when it comes to school facilities in Idaho.
Yeah, we talked earlier about Bob Huntley and his lawsuit that brought to the fore this issue about the inequities that result when low property value districts try to pay for school buildings in comparison to those that might be better financed, that you end up with wide discrepancies in the quality and safety of the public school buildings. So it's a relatively unique thing that our local taxpayers have to bear 100% of the cost of the school buildings. Maybe there's another way to do that.
You know, and Justice Jones, you were on the court when that lawsuit made its way to your bench, and of course the court ruled against it. But there was some in that decision. There was an interesting, almost path forward for what a successful lawsuit might look like, and we haven't seen that yet. It's been what, 8 or 9 years since that lawsuit was, since you ruled on that lawsuit. Are you surprised that that hasn't come in front of the court again?
I am a bit surprised. You know, the court did sort of dangle an invitation that if the legislature did not meet its responsibility, and it's their responsibility under the Constitution to pay for buildings and to maintain the buildings. We kind of left it open. If they don't do that, then you can come back. The plaintiffs didn't come back. I've kind of looked at the issue of whether that invitation would be open to anybody else, because we definitely held that putting it all on the property tax is arbitrary and not in keeping with the constitutional requirement. So it could happen.
Taking a look at this legislation, would that satisfy the legislature's obligation to fund school facilities? Would that take that path forward off the table?
Well, it depends on how this plan works out. If it actually does make a real dent, then I think that would probably discourage anyone from bringing a suit. But I think it's a matter, let's see how it works out.
There's another issue too. There's a lot crammed into this bill, a lot of different policy proposals that, on the surface have nothing to do directly with school facility funding. And we've gone over it before, but just as a reminder, diversity, equity, and inclusion bans in hiring processes, the makeup of the State Board of Education.
The
4-day
August school election date.
The August school election date is a huge one.
Definitely.
Seemingly nothing to do with school facility funding. There's a constitutional provision that says that legislation has to have a single topic that ties it all together, and this stretches that on looking at what's in that bill.
Yeah, and it feels like everybody kind of does a wink and nod about this right now. I mean, when Governor Little was asked about it last week, he talked about the golden thread and the subject matter of this that kind of ties it all together. I mean, that thread is working really hard when it comes to this bill.
Stretched pretty tight, I think, as we put it last week in our interview with one of the bill sponsors, Majority Leader Jason Monks. We have about a minute left. Do you think that would stand up to the court scrutiny?
If somebody challenged it, I think there's a really good chance that it would be found in violation of the single subject rule. I mean, you can't put everything on the Christmas tree and have it run through. And this is about as bad as you can get.
Considering how popular, though, wanting to fund school facilities is, again, it got a standing ovation during the governor's State of the State speech. Do you think anyone would bring that challenge if this were to pass? Dr. Witt.
Well, we don't seem to have any shortage of people willing to sue about things. I'm sure someone will.
Right. Well, hey, thank you all so much for joining us. Dr. Stephanie Witt, Boise State University School of Public Service, Jim Jones, former Attorney General and Supreme Court Justice, and Kevin Richert, Idaho Education News. And thank you for watching. We have much more on our website. You can find all of our online coverage at idahoreports.org. We'll see you next week.
And I want to thank my wife, Dana, who was by my side every time through all of the struggles of dealing with an Idaho legislature and lobbying.